Smallwood is not an old village. It doesn't stretch back through centuries with its own identity or long settled past. Before the streets were laid out and the houses were built, this land formed part of Ipsley, an older parish that existed long before Redditch became the town we recognise today. There was nothing here that would now be recognisable as a place. No roads, no terraces, no district name. Just fields, open ground, and land tied to the estate around Ipsley Court. That began to change in the 19th century. As Redditch grew through the needle industry, workers arrived in large numbers, and the land around the town began to fill. Streets appeared quickly, built for function rather than design, and rows of terrace houses spread across what had been once farmland. Smallwood grew out of that expansion. Not as a village, and not as a place with a long identity of its own, but as part of a working town, built to house the people who kept its industries running. And then, towards the end of that century, the area was given a name. It came from two brothers, Edwin and William Smallwood, local manufacturers, but also benefactors. After Edwin's death in 1892, William oversaw the building of the Smallwood Hospital in 1895, followed by the almshouses on Mount Street in 1896. Those buildings would come to define the area, and in time the name remained. The almshouses on Mount Street still stand today. They are late Victorian buildings created as charitable housing for those in need. People who, for one reason or another, required somewhere stable, affordable and independent to live. They were never designed as institutions. They were homes. Small, self-contained dwellings where people could live quietly, often for long periods of time. Today they continue to serve that same purpose, offering low-cost, independent housing for those in need. Over time, the type of resident has changed. Where the building was once associated more closely with older residents, it has since been used more broadly, providing homes for people in different circumstances and at different stages of life. But the purpose has remained the same: to offer a place to live quietly to those who need it. It is within that setting that the experiences begin. If you'd like to support Ghost Tales by the Fireside, you can do so over on my website or through Buy Me a Coffee. Every episode takes time, researching real accounts, checking sources, writing, recording and creating the music, or to bring these stories to life as accurately and atmospherically as possible. You can visit the main site at ghosttales.co.uk, and if you'd like to go a step further, you can support me directly at buymeacoffee.com/Ghost Tales. Over on Buy Me a Coffee, you'll find MP3 episodes and PDF books, each available for £1.50 each, or completely free if you're a member. Your support genuinely helps keep the podcast going and allows me to continue exploring new stories, locations and encounters. No pressure at all, just listening is already a huge support. And a massive thank you to everyone who already supports the podcast, or has done so in the past. It really does mean a lot. A resident living there in the early 2010s described how everything started normally. The flat felt calm and there was nothing unusual about it. Then one evening, while feeding her baby and quietly singing, she heard a voice from behind her. A sharp, clear shush. It came from the serving hatch between the kitchen and the living room. There was no one there. That same night, a cupboard began to open on its own. Slowly at first, then again, as though something was testing the movement. There was no draft, no fault in the hinges, nothing that would easily explain it. After that, the atmosphere in the flat began to change. There were moments where she would hear faint giggling or scratching sounds coming from just out of sight. Non-constant but frequent enough to feel like something repeating. At night, it became more intense. On one occasion, she woke and found she couldn't move. She was fully aware, able to see the room around her, but completely unable to react, with a strong sense that something was close to her. Later she saw a figure, a woman in a white gown, moving across the bedroom, not reacting, not acknowledging her, just passing through the space. When she spoke to other residents in the building, she realised the experiences were not isolated. Others connected to the building described similar things. A child who had seen an angry man at a window, a figure standing in a room without a face, the sound of heavy breathing in empty spaces, footsteps in hallways late at night. Individually, each account could be questioned, but together they formed a pattern. And then, quite suddenly, it stopped. After bringing her grandmother's ashes into the flat, the atmosphere changed. The noises stopped, the tension lifted. The sense of being watched disappeared. There was only one final moment. While standing at the sink, she felt a hand on her back, cold but gentle. She believed it was her grandmother. And after that, nothing more happened. The experiences are not limited to one building. They appear across surrounding streets, always in slightly different ways, but with a familiar tone. On Ludlow Road, a woman walking home late at night became aware of footsteps behind her. The sound was clear, the sharp strike of heels against the pavement. At first, she assumed someone was following the same route, but the footsteps began to quicken, closing the distance. When she turned around, there was no one there. The sound stopped instantly. On Marsden Road, her family experienced repeated disturbances while inside their home. The loft hatch was seen to twist open, and objects were thrown down into the room below. The television would switch on and off without warning, and footsteps were heard on the landing late at night. One Christmas Eve, after returning to an empty house, they found a line of old coins laid out neatly across the kitchen surface. No one had entered the property. No one could explain it. On Millsborough Road, the experiences were quieter, but no less unsettling. A figure seen briefly at first, just at the edge of vision. A woman in white. Later, she was seen clearly outside, in a neighbouring garden, bending as though picking flowers. The next morning, no one could account for who she had been. Each of these accounts, taken on its own, is easy to dismiss. But across the same area, they begin to repeat. There is one account that stands apart. It does not build slowly. It does not leave room for interpretation. A young boy was sitting on his bed in a house on Glover Street when he heard movement downstairs, loud and sudden, footsteps running. They came up the stairs quickly, heavily and uncontrolled, as though someone was in panic. Before he could react, a man burst into the room. He was screaming. Not speaking, screaming. The boy didn't recognize him. The man didn't acknowledge him. He didn't slow down. He ran straight across the room and jumped out of the window. The entire moment lasted seconds. When his family came to him, there was no one there. No one outside. No sign that anything had happened. Years later, they heard that a man who had lived in the house had taken his own life by jumping from that same window. There is no confirmed record attached to the account, but the experience remained exactly as it had been seen. Smallwood is not an ancient place. It's not built on castles or ruins, but it sits on land that has been lived on for a very long time. Part of Ipsley, later part of Redditch. A place of work, a place of care, a place where people came to live. and in many cases to spend their time quietly. And across that same ground, the experiences repeat. Not dramatically, not all at once, but consistently. Footsteps, voices, figures. Moments that feel real but don't belong. There is no single explanation. No single story, just a pattern. And sometimes that is enough.